Welcome once again to the Party of One podcast, the actual play RPG podcast where the gaming table is always set for two. I'm your host as always, Jeff Stormer. This week on the show, I am joined by Rivera for a game of A Land Once Magic. A Land Once Magic, created by one of my favorite designers in the world and also noted enemy of the podcast, Viditya Valetti, is a post-fantasy world-building game to help create unique worlds around deconstructing and evolving fantasy tropes and creating unique magic systems that are built from the ground up. It is a collection of random tables and card prompts that create these rich, sort of collapsed, ruined fantasy worlds to be explored in other games and played around with. It rules. It is a beautiful world-building tool. We made an amazing world here. We've played it on All My Fantasy Children. I love this game as a world-building resource and just getting to imagine these magnificent places. It is an unbelievably cool game. I think it's sick as hell. You can find more information about the game at vidityavaletti.itch.io, or you can check the show notes for more information. Andre is an incredibly talented character artist and illustrator, as well as a cast member on multiple actual play productions, including The Atomless, which is a Starfinder podcast and actual play following the ragtag crew of the Patchwork, traveling through the homebrew Acer system and beyond, as well as a regular contributor to streams on Manapot Studios and Total Party Kiss. They are tremendous. I am so happy that we get to have their work on the show. Andre's great. This game is great. I'm super happy. You can find more information about Andre's art at andrerivera.art and more information about everything he's got going on in the show notes. Real quick before we dive in, a special thank you to Coraline and Kevin Gallagher, our newest backers on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the show as well as games and all the other stuff that I create. I really do appreciate it. Patreon backers get early access to new episodes, raw audio from recordings, as well as games in progress, special shows like Party of None and Jeff Stormer Podcaster for Hire, and more. You can find more information at patreon.com/JeffStormer. Now, before we begin, there are a few things that I want to say. First, on behalf of myself and Party of One, I want to say that we stand in full support of our friends, peers, and colleagues in the Writers Guild of America as they fight for better pay, better working conditions, and a better path forward in the industry. And furthermore, I would like to encourage you, if you're listening to this episode, you have the financial means to do so, and you'd like to support the strike, to go to bit.ly/entertainment fund and make a donation to the Entertainment Community Fund. This is a fund that specifically supports those in the cast and crew of shows that have been impacted by the writer's strike, that helps them pay bills, rent, and stay afloat while the strike is ongoing. Simply go to bit.ly/entertainment fund, select film and television, and make a donation. If you do this, send me proof of a donation of any amount to partyofonepodcast@gmail.com, and I've got some games and goodies that I can share with you. It is the least that I can do to support the strike. As always, thank you for listening and thank you for your support. And with all that said, let's go ahead and throw it over to me in the past so that he can get started with the show. Take it past me. Thanks, future me. I'm so excited to be sitting down with Andre Rivera. Andre, thank you so much for coming on Party of One.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this game. This is genuinely just a wonderful chance for me to play a good game with a good friend. This is going to be a great experience top to bottom.
I'm excited. You're always fun to play with, so I'm just pumped to do a one-on-one game with you.
Likewise. The feeling is mutual. So before we get into our game today, why don't you let our lovely listeners at home know about anything you've got going on that you might want them to know about?
Hey, everybody. My name is Andre Rivera. You can find me at Andre Rivera Art on whatever hellscape social media exists at the time that this drops.
Which could be any. I'm not.
Truly, the timeline is the strangest right now.
There's no real way of knowing. It's gonna be Florbs. I don't know what a Florb is, but that feels right to me.
The future is uncertain, but you know what is not uncertain is that I own the domain of andrerivera.art, which is my personal website, where you can see my illustration portfolio, the actual play series that I'm in, including Atomless, Tragedy of Theologian, Unicorn Hunt, Red Line, Power Rangers The Next Generation, and Streets of Gotham, which airs on Jeff and I's very good home base of Manapot Studios, as well as some of the games that I've designed, including a Wander Home playbook supplement, Glyph, which is an emoji charades game, as well as Lodestar, which is a pirate interpretation of Werewolf with a couple of other big edits. That is very fun, submitted for Super Dylan's birthday jam. So check all those out.
I love it. I love, I know I've said this everywhere that I can say it. I really love Streets of Gotham. I enjoy playing games with you. I love the games that we play on Manapot Studios. The Flights of Fandom games that we play are always a delight. It's just really good times from top to bottom.
Yes, I was very honored when a friend of the show, Pooja, asked me to take her stead while wonderful life events were happening with her and joining that crew, and that's just been such a wonderful little experience. So I'm very honored to be a part of that and to have gotten to know more of the Manapot Studio crew.
Likewise, likewise. So today we are playing a very special game. We are playing A Land Once Magic, which is a post-fantasy world-building game by noted enemy of the show, Viditya Valetti. And I could not be more excited to sit down and play this game. We are going to spend some time world-building a fantasy world that is set after the collapse of a fantasy empire. Basically, a very kind of like a little bit post-apocalyptic, a little bit disaster fiction, a little bit fantasy world building, and I'm just really excited to build this this fantasy landscape with you today.
Me too. I'm very interested. Viditch is also a good friend of mine. I stayed with him a little bit when I was traveling in New York a few times last year, and what a great guy. But also, I'm currently on Jeff Stormer's podcast. So Viditya Violetti is a war criminal.
Yes.
I must say that for the record.
I would like to also emphasize both of those things, that Vid is wonderful, is one of those designers whose every piece of work like makes me just desperately want to make things, and is also my sworn enemy who I will render to ash beneath my boot. So like, you know, there's a real duality of existence at play. So yeah, we are gonna craft a world, and the first thing that we want to do when we are kind of entering into this world building space is build out our paint palette. We are going to, you know, flesh out sort of our initial vibe of the world, as well as some specific touchstones that are very specifically not traditional fantasy touchstones, but are going to give us some specific, you know, things like checkpoints for us as we answer questions, and we kind of refer back to things that are going to flesh out our world a little bit. So we are going to begin by picking out some paint palettes, and the way that works is we're just going to write down or think through just some one-word descriptors of what we want to see in the world. Examples include acrid, drifting, ageless, crisp, jagged, melodious, yawning. We're going to write down 2 each, and then we're going to kind of say them to the other player, and then kind of decide on the 2 big touchstones that we want to move forward with.
Great. Very interesting. I like the term paints as an artist, especially. That's just the specific like ways that this game and that Vid paints like this picture of like how we are going to be crafting this thing is so it gets the imagination going, and I feel like it captures a very specific vibe of like what we're doing, and that experience flows through the entire game. I think I have 2 words. Okay. All right. Yes, I have mine as well.
Okay. So the 2 words that I've chosen are, I saw acrid on here and I said it out loud, and it spoke to me so thoroughly that I'm going to say acrid. And my go-to with this kind of magical world experience is techno magical with a hyphen in the middle. And I think techno, instead of TECH, is TEKNO. I think that's the way we're spelling that word.
Okay. Incredible. Just as a clarification for the less verbose of us, what does acrid mean again?
Acrid is, I want to say I might be thinking of arid, but I am pretty sure it is irritatingly strong or unpleasant taste or smell, such as acrid fumes, angry or bitter, such as an acrid farewell. I in my head, I think I was thinking of the word arid, but I kind of like, I'm gonna blend those 2 together and say acrid as in like toxic, acidic, like blighted deserts and like dry, cracked wasteland is sort of the general word that I'm kind of like holding in the back of my head.
Incredible. That actually fits pretty well with the words that I selected. The first word that I picked was vast,
Mm-hmm.
and the second is jagged.
Fast. I know that we're supposed to pick two, but I think all four of these are very good and give such a clear picture that I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, this is very synchronized.
That especially jagged and acrid, this idea of like harsh rocks and sharp edges and like the experience of existing is sort of physically taxing, and this element that like that there is this like scattered throughout like deep magical technological hybrid things sort of like dotting the wasteland gives me like a really good visual.
Totally.
So, now we're going to pick one piece of media not traditionally considered fantasy that we're going to draw an aspect of inspiration from as a touchstone. These could be themes, setting elements, moments, vibes. You could name Cowboy Bebop's jazz and blues track soundtrack, or themes of everlasting hardships. You think about this for a moment. What media have I been thinking about a lot recently?
Man, oh man. I have an idea.
Throw it out. Let's hear it.
Okay, I don't know if this is media necessarily, but I've been working on a game that incorporates a lot of Paleolithic sort of history and art. And so kind of my concept is the idea, especially this is also fitting for a post-apocalyptic world, that humans are no longer top dog. That we are not at the top of the food chain as we had been for the past roughly, I want to say 5,000, 6,000 years, and that we are once again another animal to be eaten or scavenged or killed in defense of another animal.
I like that. And building, like taking that, and I think that helped me kind of identify the other touchstone that I want to pull on a little bit. There is a story that I love a lot. There is a comic that I love a lot that is written by an actual human piece of trash, and therefore I need to add that disclaimer when I talk about it.
Okay.
It is there's this experience in the comic book planetary of like superhero stuff and like pop culture stuff as fossils. And and like at one point very specifically, like they find the body of essentially Galactus as like a dead body fossil.
Okay.
And like that both very literally and like, cause like when you mentioned like Paleolithic, I went to fossils in my head, and the idea of both like literal Godzilla fossils and also the bones and remnants of like sky ships and supercomputers and these things and like and big pieces of like comic book pop culture technology and weird things and the supernatural stuff, those things existing as fossils fascinates me. Like, that existence of fossils like fascinates me.
That is so coincidental, because as soon as you said techno magic, I threw on the Breath of the Wild soundtrack to try and get in the mood. And that reminds me so much of the divine beasts in that game, and like that feeling of like feeling small inside of a great lumbering creature.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of either having giant leviathans crawling around the earth, or the entire world itself being a leviathan.
I specifically love giant leviathan creatures like walking around, and like I'm thinking of specifically, I'm thinking of, even though I have never played it and I've only experienced it through like secondhand vibes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like the way that Shadow of the Colossus like invokes
Oh,
like
yes.
giant creatures as environmental presence, where it is, creatures so large that they stop being a living thing and start being like a presence, like a creature the size of a hurricane,
They
right?
are no
Like,
longer animals, they are monoliths, they are monuments in the natural world.
yeah, and it is what if an entire rainforest could just get up and walk away one day, and like that level of scale where it is, people are the smallest thing in a colossal world is extremely compelling to me.
Mwah! I love
Love
it.
it.
This is great. This is juicy. This is my shit.
So we've got our paints, we've got our touchstones. These might not explicitly come up, but like they give us guiding things to come back to. We can always check in with them and, like and riff on them and figure out like how they literally come up, how they metaphorically come up. And from that, we're going to kind of like start mapping things out.
Incredible.
So I think that what we could do is just literally kind of work our way down the list of tables that is the rest of the game, that is us drawing from a playing card deck and just answering big elaborate questions, and then as we want to, we can come back to other things, or if you'd like, we can read the list of tables and decide what aspects of this world we want to build out in what order.
I think we have some pretty defined things in this world already. We have techno magic. We have this concept of like colossi. We have this very brutal environment. I'm wondering maybe if we should start with this table labeled the magic.
Let's do it. I love finding out what weird things involve magic. All right. I've got a deck of playing cards in front of us. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw it. And for this table, the number on the card is going to tell us, is going to ask us a question. And we're just going to talk through what that answer is. I've drawn the 5 of hearts. What natural laws does magic allow you to bend?
Ooh. My first thought is if you live in a world where you are tiny and you are faced against large, insurmountable odds, you would want not necessarily to become large, but to garner a strength or an ability that would allow you to face such things. I think maybe this is also because of the Streets of Gotham shit running through my head. I'm kind of imagining something where almost something like Bane's Venom, where like it gives you this insane strength and brute ability, but it will absolutely tax the shit out of you. It will render your body asunder. It is not meant for creatures of our size. It's meant for the Leviathans.
And pushing that even further, like if I'm reading the phrase, I love that. That is getting my wheels turning, and reading the phrase, what natural laws, like hearing you describe that, the thing that pops into my head is like, what if magic allowed you to, at a very high level, alter the laws of scope?
Explain more about that. What do you mean by scope necessarily?
I'm thinking about what you were saying about incredible strength, and like the idea of like you're not becoming large, but you are making yourself known to these creatures that are 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times your size.
Mm-hmm.
If there are magical things that allow you to amplify an aspect of yourself, and suddenly like you are able to evoke the strength of a Leviathan, or you are able to, make yourself known on the scale of a Leviathan, right? Like if the only way to catch in the attention of one of these colossal beasts is to create a presence, to turn yourself into a presence that is so large that the Leviathan sees you, even though you are the size of an ant.
I see.
It's this idea that like and then maybe it also goes the other way of like, what if you wanted to, what if you wanted to interact with something that was like a subatomic particle? What if you wanted, what if you needed to, corral or herd a single cell organism? Like, what if you wanted to, like that idea of like changing how you interact with the world around you by like turning up or turning down scale. I'm almost thinking of it as the magical equivalent of like a zoom in or zoom out function in Photoshop or something like that, where it is, I am now working, like what I see or what I experience or how I interact with the world and various aspects of myself now exist on a scale that like I was never meant to exist at. And that is the thing that kind of like tears you atom from atom as your essence rushes to fill a place and time that you were never fully meant to.
Yes. Okay, so kind of like the way I'm imagining it. In the same way that like we don't interact with ants on a like a personal level very often at all. Like maybe you'll do it like once a year if you're on a picnic. But like most of the time ants are like background noise. But imagine if an ant doesn't necessarily have the strength of a human, but had a voice that was like screaming at you and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And you're like, "Who just said that?" Like, and you look down, and there is a tiny being ready to fight you with the strength of a god. Like that's not someone you necessarily want to mess with if you're
Right.
if they're that tiny and trying to start a fight.
And that's like the idea that like imagine a bee sting, but that like hit you with the strength of an 18-wheeler truck.
Mm-hmm.
But like that bee is only getting that one sting in.
Yeah,
You're going 30 feet, but that bee is a cloud of dust.
Yeah.
And it's that and it like thinking about bees in particular, like that old adage of like the bee can only sting you once.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sense of these magical things, right? Like if I'm going to strike this colossus with the strength of a leviathan or a colossus, like if I'm going to hit this thing, if I'm going to speak to this thing, if I am going to, command the powers of magic and bend the laws of reality to make this piece of myself and my soul so large that it cannot be ignored, but I know that I am going to be rendered into atomic particles as a result.
Oh,
That's like the knowledge that you are about to do that is cool as hell. And the idea that magic only exists on those scales, right? Like there is no everyday magic. If you are invoking something magical, it is Leviathan scale, it is subatomic particle scale, like it is this is a desperate fucking thing.
There is no convenient magic. Magic is a do or die.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
Hell yeah, this rules.
This is
great. I'm so into this. This kicks ass.
Well, this actually brings up another question, because one of our paints is techno magic. So what role does technology have in this application of magic?
I would actually love to. I'm going to draw another card off of our magic table.
Oh, good.
To see like what the place of like this hyper advanced sci-fi ass technology that now exists in like fossils and ruins and like barely findable corners of the world, like what comes from that.
Okay.
That's a joker. Okay. That's a 10. Okay. That's a 10. Can you separate magic from religion or cultural identity?
Because we've been discussing magic more so almost like a natural force. I mean, based partially on the question, almost in the sense of like harnessing like atomic power or radiation, right? So the question then becomes, how would you, if there's something to that scale
And
being
like,
oriented?
and so what does that say about the technology that exists, that it approaches this sort of ubiquity in a world where there is also this like all-consuming nuclear option, for lack of a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way and my vibe, the vibe that I'm getting, the thing that pops into my head is like, I think it is less religious or cultural identity, though I think that there are cases where that might come up. I think it is almost more, what's the best way to like describe
Would
it?
you say it's political?
Civic is almost the word, like
Civic.
similar, like it's the sense of like, I'm thinking of the very real historical fact that like, I'm thinking of the historical fact slash like piece of role playing game advice that I got once, that was like, if you're making a fantasy town and you want it to be a place that makes sense, it should probably be by a river and it should probably have a port.
The civilization rule. I
Yeah,
completely understand.
and so in my head I'm like, if this piece of technology, if there is like a supercomputer, right? If I'm imagining a Twilight Zone Futurama ass like computer in a cave.
Sure.
Then that compute then the place that we live exists in the shadow of that computer in that cave. And I think it's less that people, I think that like obviously like some people are going to interpret that religiously, some people are going to tie an identity around that, but like I think it also exists in a way that is similar to, we picked this place to live because it's by a river. It is like this is this is the spot, this is the computer that is the groundstone of our community, right? We are a wheat threshing town because there are the remnants of a colossal plow mech that we were able to kickstart to like get running.
Oh, Jeff. Oh, this is so good. Oh my god. And then the ooh, okay, hold on. The gears, they're moving, they're churning. They're cranking. Okay. So in a world post-apocalyptic where the techno magic is remnant of what laid before, in the sense of
Mhm.
like what you said, like a wheat farm based around the remnants of existing farming equipment,
Yeah.
then I can only imagine in a place like New York or Bangkok or Paris that is so now, like in our current modern day, so currently technological, that place is almost like entirely labyrinthine and technological. Like they're like,
Yeah.
it is exclusively technology at that point, just bursting like chords and circuits fired with these vigors and elements from these natural sources meant for these giant colossal creatures. Not even, we don't even know necessarily what they're for, but that is the essentially the power source for these, not necessarily electricity or solar power or whatever we're trying to do right
Mhm.
now, but just all of this raw magical energy that gives them this equally colossal and massive presence in the world, in a way that also upends humans in another way, because now technology is not for us to wield necessarily. It is also a new colossus that we are trying to sort of like work around and with and against.
Yeah, and like what that says to me, and like what that place would be in a world that is so far past whatever apocalypse brought it here, is like the idea that like those mega cities are now effectively cavernous mega dungeons is like sick to me. The
Mm,
idea that there are these city-sized labyrinths that like are bustling with technology that like just are there, and like that vibe is that's such a cool, like that visual is so cool of like this is a city and this is bursting with technology, and it's bursting with like tunnels that no one knows where they go, and it's just this big colossal like mystery spot at the center, at the center of these regions that like who the fuck knows what is out there.
Mm-hmm. Ugh. Ugh. I'm eating this world.
This is sick. This rules. This is great. I'm into this. I'm loving this a lot. Now, we mentioned cities. I kind of would love to build a city primer here.
Let's build a city. Let's do it right now.
All right. We have a table. They build a city primer. We can choose whether the city is crumbling or flourishing. We're going to name the city after answering the respective questions. We are going to draw three cards.
Okay.
So we're going to draw a card for its influence, which is its proximity to another landmark. It's the uniqueness of how this city approaches magic, and a legend that is born out of this particular city. Talk to me about this particular city, and we can kind of like riff on if we feel like this is a crumbling city or a flourishing city. But talk to me about the influence of law and order and rule as it relates to this particular city that you envision in your head.
Okay. Here's my immediate thought is we have sort of established an implicit conflict in this world of nature versus technology.
Sure.
And I think this is going to be a city that is like we said, very much strong with that technological presence, and as such, the laws are quite rigid in order for the sort of operating system of this law to continue to function. I think that things are very particular. I think things are not necessarily for the benefit of individuals, but rather for the benefit of the whole, for the continued existence of this settlement. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think, like, yes, that makes a lot of sense. I like that energy a lot. And I'm going to draw our next card.
I guess collectivist is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
describe.
Very
yes.
for the greater good, kind of everybody's looking after everybody sort of out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this settlement has a unique approach to magic that is secretive, feared, or shunned if seen in public.
Interesting.
Very interesting. And like tying that into an idea that like we're all kind of looking after each other. I am going to immediately throw the hardest curveball that I can conceivably throw.
Sure.
This is one of the reasons that this particular town is so heavily invested in the idea of this sort of collectivism, is because, as we were talking about this idea that like it is built around this particular kind of like pieces of old world tech are like the river that you would build a town along, and I think this is a good example. This is a community that has access to a hive mind computer that quite literally can bridge people's like can serve as a like a nexus web is the name of the technology that I am throwing out. That this is a community that like when the nexus web is active, if you open yourself up to it, every mind is visible and like connected and can be pulled from by anyone connected to the nexus web. It is, you know, my memories, my experiences, my skills, my knowledge, is all of it immediately be pulled into anyone's brain at any moment.
That is a gigantic amount of information.
And that is why it is so, and like at that sense of like, we have to be collectivist because we live in the shadow of like, we live in the shadow and the influence of like this massive web of like consciousness and information.
Mm-hmm.
Is so like, it's so massive and overwhelming, and it has such magical potential, but it can so easily be turned and abused that it's like, if anyone is not acting in the good of the community as a whole, they got to be dealt with immediately, because we cannot risk them using all that they have immediate access to.
Do you know what else that makes me think is that, like, it is very possible that the supercomputer is the one that's like always plugged into that, and that's how they're able to run this entire law operating system. But also that if there are humans that are embedded into the political power of this, and they begin to use it, that is almost this drug for them, because humans always try to find ways of stimulating themselves, even if it's very detrimental. And
Sure.
And the idea that people would tap into this this sort of information network to advance their own careers or to gain blackmail on opponents would be a huge boon, but also ridiculously powerful. Again, this is not intended for people of our size. This is for a mega computer. This is an information highway.
Oh, I'm gonna take like what that says to me about like what, like you just hit on something about like the nature of this device that like has got me excited, and I'm very, very delighted about it. Like if this Nexus Web was the hyper advanced cyberpunk future equivalent of like a network router,
Mm-hmm.
and it was designed to bridge these supercomputers, and like the idea that like the human mind is its own kind of computer that has accidentally keyed into this thing was like not ever the intent, is like a very cool, it's a very cool vibe of like, it hits the techno magic paint palette very well of like, this is technology that was built for a purpose, but the magic that comes from it is a purpose that was never intended, and is probably, it is mixed at best that it is being used in that way, and it like has these terrifying undercurrents. If the idea that this has been retrofitted into a brain web as an entirely unexpected way.
It is the reduction of technology to how can this be utilized in everyday life while still maintaining its massive power.
Yeah. It ties into that idea of like this kind of magic as a thing that should not be dabbled with, and is not dabbled with lightly, because it comes with such a terror-inducing power that like this community, you know, they tap into it, and it requires like rebuilding the entire structure of daily life around how do we scratch the surface of this responsibly.
Right. Ooh.
Yeah. All right. We are going to talk about a legend born here of a child known for their bravery or their foolishness that comes out of the legend of this city.
Very interesting, because in a city like this that's so rigid and law bound and particular, a child is a serious risk. I work at a children's museum. Children are
scary.
Children are bundles of chaos. You cannot predict a child. And so a child, either as both as someone who is feared by power and beloved by the Commonwealth, and as a sort of Robin Hood figure that can bring destruction and wealth to very different like groups of people is interesting, and having a
Very
child
interesting.
hold that power is very interesting.
Very, very interesting. And I'm like, that pairs nicely and kind of pushes me towards the next set of questions that I kind of want to like linger on. I want to say, if the child that is a legend of this community is if the child that is the legend of this community is like a Robin Hood figure, is using this brain web, this nexus web to liberate resources and people from the influence of these political figures that have used this power to accrue their own power and secure themselves and inoculate themselves, that tells me that this particular city is a city crumbling. That tells me that like the abuse of power has already happened and has like struck the community, and like that this child is regarded for their bravery and maybe their foolishness in equal measure, because they represent a turning of the page and sort of a pushback against the old guard that drove the community into a desperate state.
As with every legend, this child is not just a singular entity that changed the world. It is a figurehead of a movement that has been building up for generations and has finally crested.
I love this. I love this so much. All right, and so we are going to answer some additional questions about our card. We are going to answer some additional questions about this city as a city crumbling.
Okay. Also, I wanted to ask, what does the child have, like a moniker?
Yes.
My first thought is, in the same sense of something that, fucks with the operating system, something based around a virus or a hack or something akin to that. That's my first thought.
I really like Mind Hack. Mind Hack as a name, as a moniker given to a child is a neat sounding moniker.
Yeah, I like a Mind Hack.
Mind Hack. So we're gonna answer a question here about the trials of the people.
Okay.
Because we've drawn the 8 of Hearts, and that is the question of what must one do to keep the city spotlight, and who has it now?
Spotlight, I think we've been talking a lot about overt like political power. Spotlight is not necessarily that. Spotlight is just who are the people like aware of most. You could definitely, I think, in the society have tons of power and no one knows who you are.
Yeah.
It absolutely could be like a classic sort of like big boss sequestered away in their ivory tower, and the face that the people hate most is whoever shows up on the mega screens, right?
Yeah.
So I think in order to keep the spotlight, there must be something that gives people a sense of direct control over their life in a way that this society does not allow, even though it is absolutely within the reins of that operating system.
And the other half of that, hearing you talk through that, the other thing that super jumps out to me is if you're in the spotlight, and this is you hearing you talk about this, hearing what you were saying, like it strikes me that to be known as on an individual level in a place that so prioritizes the many over the few, that is like that be like that very literal spotlight like is got to be like a unique experience, right? Like you know, to be in a place where you know and connect with so many people on so many like tiny infinitesimal levels, to have one person that like everybody knows, that kind of like that stands out to me as interesting. And the idea that, like, I'm not even sure where I'm quite going with this, other than like it's interesting how at odds the idea of like being in a spotlight in a very collectivist place is, and like why one would want that, or like why one would like what would come with that someone might want.
That is a very good question, Jeff. That also made me think, going back to the child for a second, the legend that the mind hack may not be an individual child, that the mind hack is a generation of children that will just completely upend the system, rather than just a singular child.
That's cool. Like that's real, and the idea that like, so what that says to me, because that is such an amazing and cool idea, what that says to me is very much that to be within this, that like to stay in the city's spotlight is to, or that the person who has it now are these people, are these political figures who have like made themselves into individuals in the face of this collectivist community. And that to take that spotlight and keep that spotlight, one needs you need a smiling face, you need a face on the mega screen, and there is this movement of young people, of children that have concocted a face that is maybe an entire illusion, maybe a collective imagination illusion, and have done it to create a figure that opposes, and have done it to oppose these existing figures that have prioritized themselves over the community, so that there is a Robin Hood, but it's actually 47 children all doing separate things to undermine this established power structure. And that is the way that the revolution happens.
More so maybe akin to like how Guy Fawkes is an individual, but also more so recognizable as like a mask that people put on.
Yes.
Okay.
I like this a lot. Do we have a name for the city before we move on to see other pieces of this world?
The idea, this Sid Meier civilization concept has me going of how are we going to name this city almost entirely driven by this mega computer? Is it named after the mega computer?
Oh, I really love that.
Because each mega computer would be its own city, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So it is both in the sense of like how Hades is a person, but also the place.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to propose that the name is NW West 17, because that is the very literal serial number on the side of this like Nexus Web super server.
Incredible. Yes. Good. NW West 17.
And I think that like it just gets shortened to just West 17. Like you arrive at West 17, and that is where you find yourself.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. I really love that a lot.
Beautiful.
What else do we want to roll on? Do we want to make a legend? Do we want to?
I would love to talk about Journey in the Land.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about what it's like to try and traverse this just daunting world.
All right. We are going to travel. We are going to talk through like what travel looks like. And we are going to kind of talk through like what different kinds of travel look like within the world that we have created. So in this case, like this is great because like this is a question. This kind of does get to the question of like what I think we're both kind of gesturing at, which is I've drawn the diamonds, which is nomads. We're talking about migration. We're talking about wayfaring.
Okay.
And so like very which is good because I think the big question that I have, and it ties in very nicely to this, is like, how do you get from place to place? Like how much travel is there between places, and how do people get from place to place?
We've discussed a little bit about the Leviathans, and that if you are not utilizing magic, the Leviathans are not going to notice you, right? I wonder, possibly, if there is a group of travelers of this method of relocation that is sort of in the shadows of these giant beasts as a means of protection, in the same way that, like, Remora attaches itself to a shark, right?
Uh-huh.
Because
Yep.
not only does that provide you protection against other predators, but that also might grant you free food that drops from its mouth, that it provides you a shelter on its very underbelly.
I like that, and I think thinking this gives me a magical thought, both in terms of like the world and in terms of both in terms of the world and in terms of a cool world detail that comes out of this.
Okay.
I'm thinking about gravity as a concept.
Ooh, okay.
And I'm thinking about, the gravitational pull of like massive bodies and the way that like gravity and the way that like gravity, gravity is stronger closer to these colossal bodies. And I'm thinking about how that relates to maybe magic.
Interesting.
Because I like and I'm almost wondering, because we talked so much and so specifically about magic existing for the purpose of interacting with these colossi, these leviathans.
Hmm.
What if the reason that is so sort of centered in the existence of magic is because that's where it's, that is where it is safest, that is where you are least likely to be rendered atom to atom when you are, in the presence of this thing. Pardon the turn of phrase, but when you are in the shadow of the Colossus is when these like magical effects, because you are literally in the sort of gravity well of this celestial body. That is
When
where
one is in
like,
the belly of a whale, what else are you supposed to do but squirm in its intestines?
and so like what I'm imagining specifically, that thing that kind of like we see this take shape is if couriers or like couriers of materials, people, what's the term for like I guess chauffeurs, or like whatever the term is for like a person that moves people from place to place, um relying on this sort of thing to like be like, I am channeling the movement of a leviathan and I am doing it, as safely as I can do it because I ride along the side of this leviathan, and with that I can carry people and I can carry supplies. Like, you have this courier that is like using magic to be like, I am channeling the movement of this leviathan, and if I do it close enough to this leviathan, I can pull on a sense of its like eldritch, elemental, earth-shaping magic to do this and be able to be alive when I make to my destination.
That is incredibly, like, evocative of, like, and that very much reinforces that idea of, like, the collectivist, because, like, I think, we were talking about the idea of, like, that ant yelling at you, but why would you ever, in any situation, try to 1v1 a Colossus? There's no point.
Right.
It would be suicide. So why not instead repurpose that immense power for the good of others, and to not fight it, but mimic it, and to be this again. We've talked a little bit about these leviathans being less creatures and more monoliths, and so to become a monolith for your community, I think also holds great power. To have these specific people that harness this intense, powerful energy, maybe it's a specific role in a community that's selected, and
I like that.
maybe in the event that a community must vacate or flee, or just simply wants to find a new home, there is a, not necessarily a lottery, but maybe like a selection process to determine who is most worthy to hold the power of this Colossus.
I've got a thought, and it's going to build on that in a way that I think I'm very excited about.
Sure.
If it is a profession, right? Like, if it is a thing that you... Because I was thinking specifically, the visual that I have in my head is like, this giant stone creature, this living mountain, moves along like through a valley along a coastline, and with it a person like conjures that sense of like that gravity. You evokes that and brings with them an entire farming community's harvest to a town 3 towns over for like to share it and to sell it and to to connect with another community. Like that's the vision that pops into my head. And if what thinking about that visual, right? This idea of this person flying alongside a leviathan with an entire harvest of food. If this is a profession that you take on, and you take it on as a courier of packages, right? A courier of goods, a courier of weapons, food, books, whatever. And you are the courier. Your job is to carry these things in the gravity well or in the wake of these leviathans. But to take on that profession means that it comes with the implicit knowledge that if your home community needs to move, that is what you have actually been training for your entire career. It's like everything else is second, but like everything else is fine. Everything else is nice. It helps people. It makes people happy. Like that's all great. But your real job is that if we all need to get up and move tomorrow, you have been harnessing this skill specifically just to unleash this one thing at this one moment, with the knowledge that like doing it at that level might destroy you. Like that is always a non-zero possibility from taking on this job of courier for your community.
Exactly. And I think this is also just my recent work on Lodestar also factoring into this, but like when a crew elects a captain, that's not a permanent role necessarily, and it holds a lot of importance for the purposes of like operating. But it's not for the purposes of someone holding and sequestering power. It is specifically in purpose of supporting the crew, for getting everyone, including the captain, including the rest of the crew, what they need. It is not, unlike in West 17, where there might be specific political figureheads who are using this magic specifically to garner to further their own ambition and greed, but instead for everyone to profit, for everyone to benefit.
The cards are in favor because I just flipped a card to see what the next thing to talk about was, and it's talking about like what is unfolding during an unexpected crisis, which is exactly what we are talking about. This sense of like
beautiful,
of like we are elected to be, a person is elected to be the courier. A person chooses to be a courier, and that knowledge. Then they have that knowledge in the back of their mind of like, I'm carrying packages back and forth. I sort of sail on the wind. Maybe there is some. Maybe I pull from whatever local piece of super tech that we have, but like. I do this and I practice this and I harness this to know that one day I may need to lift up our entire community and take it to another place, and I might not survive that experience. But doing this and keeping this working out this practice is the best chance I have of surviving that experience.
What happens in this sort of community when your courier dies and you haven't made it to your destination? Are you just stuck? Do you have to wait for an actual Leviathan to swing by again? Does someone else get reelected and try to harness power, knowing that they are far less qualified than the person who just passed?
That's a great question.
I wonder also. I think it's interesting. We are assuming also that like harnessing this power alone would spook a Leviathan. I think it is also possible that there are Leviathans that can't be stopped. If there is a Leviathan that crosses your path and if you're in its path, you will have to hold your ground. You will have to
Yeah.
contend with it in some way. And that might be one of a very few number of instances where a courier may have to become a warrior, may have
Yeah.
to individually fight off a Leviathan. Not necessarily kill it. That's not its purpose. It's to, again,
Push the
try
hurricane out of the way.
push the hurricane out of the way and get your community moving forward and out of the way. And that, I think, would definitely inflame that person's the physical, mental, spiritual strain of this magic.
Yeah. I think that that's I think that the questions that you asked of like what happens if a courier doesn't make it. I think that like the most compelling answer to me to that question is that it is unanswered and in the back of the mind of every single courier before they embark on a jaunt.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the questions that like that's the reality of doing this, of taking on this role within a community and of doing this work and of like accepting this responsibility is like, what will happen if we fail? You know what I mean? Like what does happen if we don't make it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reality of like accepting this is having to make peace with those very, very difficult, thorny questions.
That is a heavy, heavy toll.
Heavy toll. God, this game fucking rules.
This is so cool.
I love making big, elaborate worlds. Is there anything else that we want? Any other cards we want to flip before we call it? Before we depart from this world that we've built?
Why don't we do the final table for Journey in the Land to figure out what maybe a story about a courier is?
That sounds great. Let's flip a card. We've drawn the King of Spades, traditions to bring together, to celebrate, to break. I would love to hear any thoughts that you have about, for lack of a better way to put it, I think that like what I want to hear your thoughts on is not necessarily a story of one courier, but of like what the commonality of couriers as a profession or a role, a response, like what is the bridge between couriers, if that makes sense.
Yes. I think the role of courier will always be one of uncertainty. You never know what's on the road ahead. You never know what challenges you may face. You may never have even heard of this place that you're supposed to be heading towards. That's not the point. Your job is not to know as a courier. Your goal, the role itself is of willpower, of just moving forward. And I think that it's a tricky balance for someone who's a courier to balance what is expected of a courier to relocate, to rehome, and to provide safety to all these people that you are escorting. But also to understand that the magic and the power that you hold is so enormously burdensome to you and possibly to your party if things go awry, that you need to really understand that traditions are things that are important but not sacred. They are something that is the primary conflict, I think, is knowing that you have so much power and it's not for you, it's for everyone. It's for the purposes of getting things done, even if maybe the quest itself is faulty, if this place is just an El Dorado, if it's a place that never existed at all and is just a fantasy, if it's, if the people in your party don't trust you and even decide to desert you, that's not the point. You can't have those doubts. You can't have those festering little thoughts in your mind. You have to move forward. You must move like a colossus. A colossus doesn't stop for a pebble in the road. A colossus doesn't stop when there's a river, it steps over it. It marches through the river.
And what the story that I want to tell, I think, the thing that I want, the note that I want to leave you on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking there's a specific visual that pops into my head of an experience that brings a smile to my face when it happens.
Okay.
In Philadelphia, we have trolleys. They ride on trolley tracks, and specifically what happens and what this makes me think of is the moment when two trolley drivers pass, and the way that they will always like ring their trolley bell at one another, and like it's just a very joyful moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think about like how impactful it must be as a courier to pass by or to come into the orbit of another courier.
Yeah.
Whether that is mid-jaunt when you are both sort of like conjuring this magic and moving things, or if it is just like you're in town and this town also has a courier, like that itself is gotta be such a like, because imagine how like it's got to be isolating, right? To be like, I have this power, I can't. It's not for me. It is for all of these other people. Like my work is so thoroughly in service of the people around me, and like to see another person in another place that has also made that same decision. There is something sort of powerful and almost beyond words, and I think that there is maybe like a gesture or a wordless gesture or action that is taken when you cross paths with another courier that is the equivalent of saying like, we like in a world where we serve everyone, at least you and I in this moment are in this together.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of there's sort of this idea that's been stuck in my head of seeing someone and knowing so much about them on first glance, and understanding that a lot of their story can just be read by how they walk, how they move, how they look, how they dress, so just almost purely on visual cues. And I wonder if maybe careers just walk as if they are physically weighed down. And to see someone else walking the same way as you do, and to just almost like walk like I'm almost like a dance or some sort of movement ritual where crossing paths, it is not a verbal communication of like, I support you, I understand what you're going through. It is we have the same role, we understand each other's burden, and I wish you so much luck with whatever your community has going on.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing thing. I think if you see someone dancing that dance on the road, maybe what it is that like if you have a snack, you throw them a snack. If you have if you are a courier and you see a courier on the road and you have you have a candy bar in your back pocket, you throw them a candy bar. You have like a baked good from home, you toss them a baked good. And like it's a thing that like it's I almost envision it as like a ritual that is like kept secret from the larger world. It's sort of just a ritual. It's like it's one of those things where like if a random person handed a courier like a this kind of a gift, it would feel false, right? Like it'd be like, okay, like don't like dial it back. But like to receive it for like you receive it from someone and you see the same weight in their step and the same kind of like dance in their shifting movements, and there's like okay, yeah, I accept this. Like it when it comes from that person, like it is a gesture of like we are together in this, and we have made this decision, and we acknowledge one another.
Absolutely. God,
this
world rules.
And with that, we will depart from this world that we have created. God, this game's so fucking sick. I love this game so much.
Shout out to Viddy for just giving us the means to create so many infinitesimal worlds.
It's so and they like the way that they build is so differently, and just like it's just incredible. It just rules. It's just the absolute best, and I love it so very much.
Beautiful human. And you've been a beautiful human, Jeff.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
Of course.
God, this game ruled. Thank you so much for coming on the show and playing this with me. This was the absolute best experience I could have asked for. I'm so delighted.
Thanks, Bob, for having me.
Of course.
This was such fun.
I'm so happy. Real quick, before we wrap up, where can people find you and your work online?
You can find me at Andre Rivera Art on whatever hellscape social media still exists when this releases as well. It's primarily Twitter and Instagram, if those things still exist. Probably Instagram will still exist. But you can primarily find me at andrerivera.art, which is my personal website that has my illustration portfolio, the actual play series that I'm in, and a number of the games that I've designed, many of which are on my itch as well, many of which are also collaborations with the wonderful Supergel, also a big friend of the show. So please,
big friend of the show,
check all of those things out. I may or may not have commissions open. It really just depends. So just keep an eye out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for coming on to the show. This was just an unbelievably amazing experience that I'm so grateful that we got to take on and play this game together. I'm so happy. And for now, I'm going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take it, future me. Thanks, past me. And thanks again to Andre for coming on the show. That game was, like, that world was amazing. The getting to play that game and create that world and just, like, build out this post-fantasy universe piece by piece and, like, get to tug on the strings of, like, well, we said this, so doesn't that mean that? And, like, that's just such a cool world-building experience, and this game, you know, beautifully facilitates that with its random tables, but also, you are such a wonderful collaborator, and, like, this experience was unbelievable. Be sure to head to viditiavaletti.itch.io for your own copy of A Land Once Magic, and be sure to head to andrerivera.art for more information about all of Andre's work, and be sure to follow Andre on Twitter, as long as that's still a thing, at Andre Rivera Art. Then while you're on Twitter, follow us at Party of One Pod, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Party of One Podcast, find us on TikTok at Party of One Podcast, find us on Tumblr at Party of One Pod, subscribe to our newsletter at buttondown.email/Party of One Podcast, and join our Discord community at bit.ly/Party of One Discord. If you enjoy the show, there's a lot of ways to support it. You can support us financially at patreon.com/JeffStormer or Ko-fi.com/JeffStormer. You can give us a nice iTunes review, shout us out to a friend, give us some love on social media. You can buy some Party of One merch at bit.ly/Party of One merch. Or, if you're looking for more great podcast content, you can check out All My Fantasy Children, which is a character creation, storytelling, and world-building podcast that I make with my best friend in the world, Aaron Catano Saez. We take a listener-submitted prompt and spin it into an original fantasy character, populating a shared universe one story at a time. You can also check out Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, which is an actual play about a heartless witch, a cozy house, and the many people making their homes inside. Both of those you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Party of One is, as always, produced and edited by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. Music for the show comes from the song Infinite Lives by Mega Ran featuring the D&D Sluggers, and the Party of One logo is by Evan Rowland. If you'd like to inquire about advertising rates, coming on the show as a guest, or about press coverage of the show, you can email me at partyofonepodcast@gmail.com. And, unless I am mistaken, that is all we do here. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. Remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. Remember that self-love and self-care are radical and defiant acts of resistance. And as always, party on, everybody.